Welcome to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have real, honest, smart, and sometimes even hilarious conversations about co-parenting, separation, and divorce, and all that goes along with that. I'm Kate Anthony, your Divorce Survival Guide, and all-around expert in all things divorce, and today we're going to talk about should you stay in your marriage for your children? So one of the most common reasons people stay together is for their children, right? They think that it would be better for their kids to stay together, at least till they're 18, right? That's sort of the cutoff. When they leave and go to college, then we can get divorced. And frankly, depending on your unique situation, this might be a great reason to stay together. It also might be the worst reason in the world. Because we are told over and over again in our society that we have to stay for our children. That children that come from, quote, broken homes, I hate that term so much, they do less well in school, they're damaged, they grow up to have poor coping and relationship skills. We're told that they become alcoholics and drug addicts, right? So we try, and we try harder, and we try harder, and we try harder. We bend ourselves into pretzels trying to make this square peg fit into that round hole come hell or high water, because if we don't, then our children will suffer and we will have failed. I call bullshit. I left my marriage for my son because what my ex and I were modeling to our son wasn't what I wanted him to grow up to have for himself. While I had this vision of myself as being this strong and powerful woman, that wasn't based on any kind of reality. This wasn't who I was actually being outwardly. I had this sense of myself inwardly that I was all this powerhouse shit, but that wasn't who I was. And by staying in my marriage, I was actually really anything but, right? I was allowing myself to be treated in a way that I would never want my son to treat anyone in his life, or I would not want him to accept being treated this way, right? But this is what we were modeling. And I knew that the only way that this small, innocent child had any chance of creating a happy, lasting, loving relationship in his future was for us to get out of this marriage, for each of us to find ourselves and create happiness somewhere else. And I had this moment, right? I talk about this a lot, about how I was agonizing and should I stay? Should I go? How do you know? Right? And I had this moment. I asked my friend David this one day. I said, he's the only person I knew who had been divorced. And I asked him, I said, how do you know? How do you know when it's time? And he said, when you know, you'll know. And at the time, I really wanted to punch him in the head. But I did. I had a moment where I was standing, looking in my closet, just sort of staring into my closet. And all of a sudden, I knew. And all the things that I knew in that moment, I knew that my husband was worth more. I knew that we brought out the worst in each other. I knew that being with me kept him locked into a dynamic that he was actually better than. He did not treat me well. But I also knew that he was worth more. I knew that I would never break free of being the oppressed, codependent, small, fragile bird that I had become unless I broke out of my marital cage. I knew that staying in our marriage was keeping us from finding people that we actually liked. This small sidebar story, I remember at one point I was working with a coach, and she said to me, "You don't like your husband and you're the only person who doesn't know it." And frankly, I don't think he liked me very much, right? But staying together kept us married to people who really didn't like each other. It was keeping us from finding relationships with people with whom we could actually create meaningful and trusting bonds. And that if we could find that outside of each other, our son would actually have a far better chance at creating healthy relationships down the line. But If he grew up in our household with us as his models, no way. No way would he have a chance. And I'm happy to say that my ex is actually now remarried. And I can say that without hesitation that his current marriage is one that I aspire to. Their home is full of love and laughter. They truly like each other. Truly. I mean, they love each other, but they actually really enjoy each other, deeply enjoy each other. And, frankly, sometimes that's not easy to see. Sometimes it's really hard to witness, right? But I'm also really clear that my son is far better being raised in that house 50% of the time than in our old house 100% of the time. Because my ex and I had a dynamic that was so toxic for everyone around us, especially our child. And he doesn't have that dynamic with his new wife. And I've never had that in any of my relationships since then. So, sometimes the combination just isn't good. Sometimes you pick people. I picked my ex-husband when I was 28 years old. And by the time I was 38, it no longer fit who I wanted to become, who I was trying to grow towards. And every time I was trying to grow, I would get stifled and shut back down. And once I was able to get out of my marriage, I was able to blossom. I was like a plant that requires light that's put in a pot, and the lid kept going on, and I was dying. I was truly dying. And spiritually, emotionally. And so as soon as I got out of my marriage, I was able to flourish. And I think my ex was too. I can't speak for him, but I see him. And I think our child has a far better chance than if he had ever been kept, because he would have been put in that pot and he would have shriveled as well. So if you have been staying for your kids, consider looking at this from another angle. It's possible that there's another point of view here. It's possible that what you're modeling may not be the healthiest thing. And I know plenty of people, and I'm sure you do too. I have friends who tell me that they got on their knees as children. Their parents stayed together for the children. But when they were children, they would get on their knees every single night and pray that their parents would get divorced because they couldn't stand living in this household. And if you think you're hiding it from your children, you may be very good at it, right? But children especially absorb energy. They know what's up. Children always, they are so much, there's that story about, how much closer to God children are. And I am the least woo person in the world, but I've seen this over and over and over again, that when I remember walking in, you hear stories all the time about how children see ghosts, talk to ghosts. They're closer to God. I remember walking into my son's room when he was about 10 months old or something. And he was having a full-on conversation with someone in the corner. And when I walked in, he said, bye-bye. And it's that kind of connection that they have to an energetic sphere that we don't necessarily, we think we're doing our best to cover things up, is what I'm saying. But our kids know what's up. They know. They feel it. So, put your marriage through that test. Is this what I want to model for my children? Is it possible that there's something better outside, on the other side? And here's the thing. I am not remarried, right? But what my son does get to see is a woman who has fully embraced her power, who has done really hard work to excavate, to heal, to grow, who doesn't tolerate unacceptable behavior in relationships. And when I see it and when I experience it, I move on really quickly now. It doesn't take me 10 years. And I have conversations with him about that. He'll say, why did you break up with so-and-so? And I'll be very honest. Say, well, he didn't treat me well. Or we had this dynamic and it really wasn't working. Or I'm really honest with him because I want my son to know what is a healthy relationship and what isn't. So put your marriage through that test. And you're going to find a lot more answers there, I think, than almost anywhere else. Thanks for listening to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. You can find me over at kateanthony.com and be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes so you don't miss an episode. See you next time.